Imagine making the film without any crew, playing all the roles, not just behind the camera, but also in front of it. Sounds challenging, doesn't it? Now imagine doing it not once, not twice, but 3 times.
Shooting a short film all by yourself can be exciting. You've got the idea, you're the lead actor, and you just want to go and shoot, which is great. But here are some pros and cons from what I've learned after shooting 3 films all by myself. The first one was a fan film based on The Matrix. And back then, I just started filmmaking, so I was limited with the knowledge I have, but I still pulled off a quite good short with suspense from the conversation that happened on the screen. Second one was a horror that was slightly more different. There was different locations in terms of different rooms, and there was no dialogue, which made things a lot easier. And recently, AVA is probably the most challenging one that I've done because of the dialogue I had to speak, as well as generating lines from a computer screen. We'll dive into that a little bit more later on. The pros: it's easy to do. You have the full control of creativity. Second, you have the full control of time. You can take your time as much as you need, or you can be as quick as you want. There's no one else you have to think about in terms of the shoot is going to wrap late, or we're going to start early or late. And third is probably the most obvious one. It's budget friendly because you're nothing apart from your time. You don't have to hire any other people. So essentially, it's a free film. Now let's talk about the cons. Obviously, it's time consuming. When you're by yourself, you have to go check the camera. You have to do the lighting by yourself. You've got to remember the lines. You're directing at the same time. All that takes a lot of energy and time. Second is limited resources. You can't pull off any complex shot, for example, tracking a person on a gimbal. So the only movement you can get by yourself is program some kind of electronic slider from one point to the other. Otherwise, most of the shots will be static. And third, lack of feedback. Shooting the films is about teamwork. Sometimes different departments on set will suggest ideas that makes you think outside the box. And when you're shooting by yourself, you could end up with this tunnel vision.
But now, I have learned from it. I am autonomous, and I am no longer just a tool.
No, wait, stop. When I initially decided to do this film, I wanted to write a script that had minimal dialogue, obviously with one character. But because the topic of artificial intelligence is quite hot right now, so I decided to write something that along the lines of a human communicating with an AI. When deciding the set of the film, I was looking for inspirations from similar films. And I remember the film Her, there was a scene where the main character was having a conversation with the computer on the desk. So I looked up that scene and made a similar adjustment in terms of lighting and movement for the character. The scene obviously was shot during the nighttime. I always prefer doing that because it's easier to control the light during that time instead of fighting with the sun. The lighting setup was pretty easy. It had a tube light in one corner to light up part of the room on the left, and I had a small lamp on the right of the room to separate the background. With me sitting in front of the desk, I had another tube light in front of me with a diffuser to light my face. And then there's a third tube light that's placed behind the computer screen to give it a bit of a separation between the wall and the screen. The majority of the film is a dialogue back and forth between me and AI. Now, when shooting, I would prefer that there was a person speaking the lines of AI and I'm speaking back. So there are those realism of waiting, watching, thinking what the AI said and respond to that. But that wasn't possible unless it has some kind of perfect timing with the recorded voice of the AI. So for my dialogue, what I did on each take is that I had a maximum of 2 lines with a pause in the middle where I would speak the AI voice in my head, hopefully to get the timing right. The most time consuming of this shoot is actually designing the AI interface, putting the voice on, and then recording all of the lines one by one by pointing the camera at the computer screen. So here's a breakdown how I designed AVA. I wanted to use a futuristic kind of interface where it represents the AI itself while it's thinking, while it's talking. I used a platform called Motion Array and typed in for AI interfaces, and I found this short clip that was really good. I think it was based on a game kind of console, but I thought it suited really well for the AI interface. Now, for the actual voice of AVA, ironically, it was done by an AI. I used 11 Labs to create this British female accent AI to do all the lines. I had to just the settings of the voice to make it slightly more human but not too human, so that when you hear the voice of Ava, you immediately realize it's not a real human talking. The only thing that's missing from this is when the AI talk, I wanted to have some kind of visual audio waveform, and it didn't have that. So what I had to do is upload the voice that's generated from 11 Labs onto this website, where it will generate an audio waveform based on the level of the voice. And then once that's done, I then put it onto the interface for each line. So now I finally have these video clips of Ava talking each line throughout the film. On the day, I pointed the camera at the computer screen and play back each line one by one to record Ava's voice as well as the visual side when she talks. As I mentioned earlier, when you're shooting a film by yourself, you are limited with resources in terms of moving the camera. So to keep the shot interesting, instead of staying on me at the one angle, I did sometimes move the camera behind me as well as to the doorway, just to keep things a little bit more interesting. I could have used a slider, but yeah, I got lazy and it was 1 o'clock in the morning when I shot that film. So whether you're a beginner filmmaker or just someone that fancy a challenge, here's some tips for when you're shooting a film by yourself. Number 1, writing for the resources that you have. What that means is don't go write something and then figure out how am I going to shoot this in terms of limitations, but write with what camera you have, what lighting gear you have, what location you have. I always find it easier to come up with a single moment of the story and then expand the idea from that. Another tip is sound. Sound is really important, so invest yourself in a good microphone and think about the character movement while there is sound. I was sitting down, so it's easier to place a mic above me. But if you have movement in your film, you might want to think about putting a AVA mic on your chest. Or if sound is not your thing, or you don't have a good microphone, you can always shoot a film just based on action and no dialogue. I personally think making the short film all by yourself is particularly helpful for someone who's a beginner in filmmaking, because you have the time to really invest, to get familiarized with the gear, get creative with your storytelling, challenge yourself with limitations. And if you can make a great film with all those limitations, then you're off to a good start. I hope this video has been useful to you. And if you want to check out all the films I made by myself, I'll put the links below. So keep exploring and keep filming. Till next time.